Okay, so welcome again. I want to show you a new module. It's called YAML PP. So we have several YAML modules on CPAN. Actually many, but I show you just a few ones. So there's YAML PM. Who knows YAML PM? YAML SIG, YAML XS, YAML Tiny. Do we need another one? Absolutely. So
many more.
Yes, many more. So I was working on YAML PM at the end of 2016. I'm closing some old patches and applying patches to Git pull requests, and at the same time actually the YAML test suite created by Ingi was growing. And I wanted to find out if I can actually write a YAML parser, because now there was the test suite, so I had a very good excuse for not reading the YAML spec. And fixing YAML PM was not an option. Sorry, Ingi, but I wanted to work it completely different. So just a quick comparison of formats. That's the left one is YAML. In the middle we have JSON and YAML, because JSON is actually a subset of YAML. And on the right side we have YAML flow style. So you can write YAML JSON-like, but you don't need quotes. You have trailing commas and you have comments. And the highlighting, which you saw here, was done by YAML PP. And for doing such highlighting, it needs to work a little bit different than all the existing parsers, because it shouldn't throw away white space and comments and stuff like that. So how does it work? So it has a lexer, and the lexer turns the input into tokens. And this is how the debugging output looks like. So we have all these different tokens, and at this point there's no structure involved or anything, just plain tokens, and I don't know where a mapping starts or a sequence starts. And then there's the grammar. And the parser passes the tokens to the grammar. And if it gets a matching token, then it calls a parser callback. And this one will then actually create an event. So that's an event like a mapping starts or a sequence starts, or here's a scalar. And this is how it looks like. So on the left side we have the parse, the parsing process. On the right side we have the constructing process. And first we have a stream start. That's just saying there's content. And then we have the document start. The 3 dashes start a document in YAML. And then we have a mapping start and a scalar event. Another scalar and another one. This is a sequence. So we have a sequence start, another scalar, sequence end, and so on. So dividing this into 2 parts of the process is very helpful, because it's easier to write and it's easier to test, because the part until the middle is it's language independent, because constructing the structure is very much dependent on the programming language, because not all languages support everything what YAML supports. And so the YAML test suite, I will show you in a minute. So many other processes actually use this event-based parsing. So YAML C++, Haskell, Java, libyaml, nimyaml, YAML PEGX, YAML PP, Python, YAML. And this is a typical test case from the YAML test suite. So here we have the input YAML. And this is actually the JSON, which results in the same data structure. That's you cannot use this for every YAML input, because JSON just doesn't support everything. And on the right side we have the event format. So that's invented by Ingi to have a very short format of the events. We have starting events starting with a plus, and values that are scalar events, and ending events. Here are all the test cases that we currently have, the invalid ones. So that's really a lot. And this is how a source file actually looks. So that's the test.ml format. And Ingi will tell you later about that. So currently, the tokens I showed you before, they are just a plain list, so they don't know when a mapping starts. But at some point, I want to connect them to the events. And then it will be possible to create a roundtrip parser. So you can read the YAML in and keep some information somewhere hidden. And then you change a value, and then you write it out again, and all the formatting stays the same. So there is one parser I know that can do this. It's YAML in Python, but I don't know of any other parser that can do that. That can be really useful to keep all the formatting, but it's hard. So YAML supports aliases. Do you know aliases in YAML? Anchors and aliases. So you can actually, if you have a data structure and a reference, and the reference is mentioned several times in a data structure, then if you dump it in JSON, it will just be copied all over. But in YAML, you can just refer to it to an alias. And it also supports cyclic references, which is very cool, but which makes constructing very hard. But this can also lead to memory leaks if you load YAML from an untrusted source. So YAML PP supports disabling cyclic refs. And then there's YAML tags. You probably don't see tags very often when you work with YAML. Who knows YAML tags? Okay. So you can serialize objects with that, for example. And most YAML processes implement some kind of generic tags for object serialization. This looks usually like that. So this is Ruby, here we have Perl. Some use a single exclamation mark, some use double. And we also have local tags. And for example, in the Perl loaders, YAML XS and YAML SYK, these are also loaded into objects. So we have this input, we have exclamation mark dice, and this will be loaded just into an object with the class dice. But if you have the second one, it will also be loaded in an object called nonsense ... class name, which doesn't exist. That's probably not so good, and it can be actually a security hole. But yeah, since version 0.69 and YAML PM 1.2.5, you can actually disable this. But you can also only disable it or enable it, so you cannot pick any certain class you want to load. But that's on my wish list, actually. I want to do this. And I actually want to specify code to instantiate the object. So usually it just does a bless. So you get a mapping or a sequence, and then it will bless the object with the tag name, and that's it. But maybe I want to specify a subroutine, or it should call the new constructor. And I also want to match strings with regular expressions and use my own constructing. And the last feature is actually already supported by YAML PP. PyYAML supports all of these. So PyYAML is very good in this. And I also started working a bit on PyYAML because I'm learning a little bit Python. But it's good for Perl because I can steal its features and I can avoid its mistakes. So here we have an example of loading timestamps as objects. I had problems to get this all on one slide, so hopefully it's readable. The API will probably change, so you can use this, but be prepared that it will probably change. You define a regular expression, which matches a timestamp, and then you add a subroutine, which just takes the arguments and creates a datetime object. You can also say this can be implicit. And on the right we have an example. So the first one is implicit. It tells the parser anything that looks like a timestamp will be loaded as a datetime object. And this one is explicit. And if you specify a 0 here, then it will only load this one. So this can actually be very helpful to do things. This is just an easy example. So now you can load Roman numbers into integers. Like you always...
Tag if it's implicit.
Pardon?
Do you need the tag field if it's implicit? So in Rich, you just had, see where it says tag arrow? Add resolver tag arrow. Do you need that tagline if it's implicit?
No. No, you need that.
So if you have video, can you
I could probably repeat it louder. I just wanted to know if you needed that tagline in there, if implicit was true.
No. So yeah, you can just leave that off if it's implicit. So we have an example of Roman numbers. You always wanted to do that, right? So you have Roman numbers in your YAML and you want to load them as integers. This is a very cheap subroutine that does the conversion. I didn't look for any Damien modules to do this. Didn't have time. And yeah, this works. So this returns a 7. But you can also do really, really cool stuff with it. Second. So in the distribution you will find an example of a YAML file and a script. So you can pass external variables. So try it out and play with it. So this is really a question that is asked often. So how do I replace some values like $ something in my YAML with actual values that are passed to the parser? For example, environment variables. You know, it's like a templating system. And you can add your own templating system to YAML now with this. So yeah, look at the example. A note about YAML 1.1 and 1.2, YAML PM and YAML SUC were written for YAML 1.0. YAML XS is based on libyaml for YAML 1.1. YAML PP targets 1.2. And what are the differences? That's really hard to say, but syntactically they are more or less backwards compatible. There are some edge cases, but actually YAML 1.1, the spec is sometimes a little bit ambiguous. So you should get away with that. So YAML PP should be able to parse 1.1 documents. And then there's the schema. So things like Booleans, numbers, and other things are actually resolved differently. You can read all about it in this very long article if you want to know more about it. But here's a short example. So this is YAML 1.1. These are all the values you can have for true. You have a Y, uppercase Y, you have yes, you have true, and you have un. And for null values you have the tilde and several null strings and the empty string. This is YAML 1.2, the core schema. And actually in YAML 1.2 you can implement 3 different schemas. So there's also a JSON schema, and this only has true and null, which is actually, I think, a very good choice. It's also faster to parse, of course. And so, because I implemented all these 3 schemas in YAML PP, and I tried to do it in a very generic way, I'm able to add YAML 1.1 support. So you can actually load your YAML documents you were reading until now with YAML PM or YAML XS, hopefully. And yeah, I want to add support for this soon, if I get time. But as a general recommendation, just use only true and false and null and not one of the uppercase words. But actually there's one little thing. I think YAML PM does not support null, it just supports the tilde. So I will add that maybe. There's Booleans. So which YAML modules support Booleans? So YAML PM and YAML Tiny don't support them. They just load them as strings. YAML Sick supports them if you set implicit typing. It returns the empty string 01. YAML XS now supports also JSON PP Booleans. So you can actually round-trip Booleans, and you can load a YAML file and dump it to JSON with keeping the Booleans, and YAML PP does the same. You can actually choose between JSON PP Boolean and Boolean PM. And here's the YAML test matrix. So I showed you the YAML test suite cases. And then there's this cool YAML editor, which is a Docker image with a lot of YAML processes, which Ingi also started. And I just thought, well, you know, we have these test cases, we have the frameworks. I can create a matrix. And this is how it looks like. YAML PP is up there. It's still a lot to do, actually, but it's not bad. So these are all the parsers that support the event-based parsing. And down here we have the ones additionally that only support the comparison with the JSON. So you can also see all the gory details of this matrix for every test in every framework. And you can look at the actual results of that. It's actually, you know, it's not that bad how it looks like. You know, it's very red, but these are a lot of edge cases. You probably never use those cases in real world, so it's bad, but it's not that bad actually. So and I hope I will make it better in the future. And yeah. I think I'm done with the slides. So are there any questions?
I'd like to make a quick statement. So I'm Ingi. I was one of the creators of the YAML language and creator of the worst Perl modules for YAML. But since the beginning, like YAML is the most complex thing in the world that only has 2 calls, load and dump, right? I mean, that's all you ever see. But hopefully from seeing Tina's talk, you see how complex it is. I always envied PyYAML and always wanted that to work in Perl, and had several false starts on that. And Tina actually came through with this. So this is some of this is how YAML was meant to be. It's actually meant to be even deeper. This, and Tina will get to that. Tina probably understands YAML better than probably top 5 people in the world for YAML. And so thank you for that work. And also, we're working on YAML 1.3, which hopefully everybody will be happy. We'll just remove. We just found so much unintended shit in the spec. Now we have the test suite that's a provable thing rather than a test, which is reading tea leaves. Lots of tea leaves on the spec. It's pretty hard to read. So hopefully in the next 20 years you'll see YAML 1.3 be the one that does the Perl implementation.
Thank you. Thank you very much.